Joining me today to discuss industrial cybersecurity is Keith Walsh, who's the Director of OT Cybersecurity at ARMIS. Welcome, Keith.
Morning, Sid. Morning, Sid.
There's a lot of issues. We cover industrial cybersecurity in all kinds of ways. And for the purpose of our viewers, can you kind of describe where ARMIS fits in that? There's a lot of different variations there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Sid. Great to be here. So ARMIS sits in a space where we address all cyber assets, and we describe a cyber asset as any device that communicates, regardless of it's wired or if it's wireless, if it sits in OT, if it sits in the building support services, the building management services that surround OT, IT, which is oftentimes converged and a vector into OT. We address all devices, wired and wireless, that surround OT and have a cyber attack surface that needs to be protected.
In my research, we find that a lot of companies are struggling to maintain their cybersecurity defenses and things like that. Is this something ARMIS can help them with, and in what way?
Yeah, there's been a huge explosion in the market with regards to all sorts of new OT devices, especially new IoT devices, wireless devices, and moving into 5G. As those devices now begin to become integrated and introduced into our infrastructure, what that's really meant is we have an increased attack surface. With all of these devices that are now being introduced, with it comes applications, with it comes software and firmware, and inherently that delivers vulnerabilities. And the rate of growth of these devices as they're being introduced into our network is exponentially increasing the attack surface. And with the convergence and digital transformation, Industry 4.0, and these systems now communicating and intercommunicating across boundaries, what that really means is that there is, just so much more opportunity for our adversaries to find their way into our critical infrastructure.
In our research, we find that a lot of our clients and a lot of major companies are trying to drive convergence between their IT and OT programs. Is this something that ARMIS can help them with? And if so, how can you help them?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a huge driver for our business. When we talk about convergence, we talk about digital transformation. It seems like firms are doubling back into the infrastructure that they deployed maybe 20, 30 years ago. And they really want to extract information out of OT. They want to extract information about resiliency, about uptime, about safety. And the systems that are asking for that type of information are typically business-centric systems which reside outside of OT. So what you're faced with is the need to revisit those systems, the networks, the devices themselves. Sid, these devices were placed into these networks with a very weak risk posture, right? Oftentimes there's little to no authentication into these devices. There's certainly not encryption. There's no TLS in and out of these OT-centric devices. But now we have these devices that are communicating into IT, right? And vice versa, IT into OT. So what you have is really this converged network that many of our customers are finding that they're having to engage multiple verticals within their own company to address it, right? The SOC, the NOC, all those IT-centric tools that have been doing, yeoman's work on the IT side of the house are now being stretched into the OT side of the house, because traditionally the OT side of the house doesn't have these tools, but yet those devices in the OT side of the house are now converged with the IT side of the house. So you have one big ubiquitous network that we're finding that the walls are being torn down between IT and OT. The human assets are now over in IT, are inheriting the OT assets, and the OT side of the house is inheriting those IT tools.
Similar kind of question with digital transformation, except what we're finding is, a lot of companies, sometimes it's rather than being cybersecurity being an enabler, it's a disabler, because they're afraid to launch certain programs because of cybersecurity. Are you seeing the same thing? And if so, is ARMIS doing something about that to help them?
Yeah, it's interesting. We meet with many companies, and we meet with the IT side of the house, we meet with the OT side of the house, and we really try to get an understanding of the direction and the drivers, right, to address the lack of security posture in OT, it is oftentimes that we still come across those OT organizations that are very siloed, right? So there's, nary an opportunity where an IT guy sits in the same room as an OT guy. But we're seeing that change. That's becoming a paradigm shift that we are seeing in the marketplace. We're seeing these discussions now coming top down. We're seeing them start with maybe the board. We're seeing them start with the CISO, the CIO, the CEO, and then funnel its way down into the functional vice presidents that are now responsible, right, for the overall security posture, not only of IT, but now that they're inheriting OT, they're starting to ask those questions and they're starting to invite those OT folks into those discussions because they understand that, you really truly need to align the business, you need to align the personas in IT, in OT, and you need to align the tools, right, to all work together in harmony. So we are certainly seeing a transformation.
And the last thing I guess I'm just curious about is partnerships. Partners seems to be a really important thing in cybersecurity. And, what's ARMIS's approach to that, your strategy for that?
Well, we see it as it truly takes a village, right? Going it alone, that's a tough road to hoe. So we see it as bringing together the best of the best in a community to protect not only OT, but IT. Because let's face it, right? The attacks into OT predominantly come from outside of OT, right? They come from IT, they come from proxied machines in IT, they come from the internet. So there are, no one vendor does it all, right? Endpoint protection folks do endpoint protection. Firewalling folks do firewalling. NAC folks do network access control. And ARMIS does what ARMIS does. What we do is we identify all assets, wired and wireless, as they communicate, because that is the single most important element of any security framework is a true discovery of all devices, right? So that's what ARMIS brings to the table. And then we ingest that information from our ecosystem, our community of partners that can offer additional signal into ARMIS, right? So we'll pick up traffic as it's traversing a span port, as it's traversing a wireless network. But the enterprise and the ecosystem of partners that we can pull signal from helps to enrich that information. And then we can feed that information back into that ecosystem to protect the environment. So ARMIS's position is the larger our ecosystem, the more opportunities we have to add contextual information and to make better choices to protect the environment. So our hardware OEM manufacturing environment is extremely large. Our partner environment, our system integrators and our global partners is extremely large because, as I mentioned, we see this as it takes a village. So we like to leverage those ecosystems and those partners in it.
Well, thank you, Keith. It's been a pleasure speaking with you
Thank you,
today.
Sid. It's good to see you again.
Today, we've been speaking with Keith Walsh, who's the Director of OT Strategy and Operations at ARMIS. Thank you for watching.